Buddhāvataṃsaka Sutra. Book 39. Entry into the Realm of Reality. Video 25. Sarvanagarikṣasambhavaitya. Then, contemplating that enlightening liberation of supernal manifestations in a moment of thought, producing floods of joy, fostering it and making it manifest, remembering the instruction of the night goddess Prashantarudasagaravati, absorbing it, keeping in mind knowledge of the principles inherent in it, a measureless repository of many principles to be found in each statement, fixing it in memory, examining it intellectually, putting it into practice, consciously extending it, physically feeling and dwelling in it, entering into it, Sadhana made his way to the night goddess Sarvanagarikṣasambhavaitya. He saw the night goddess sitting on a great lotus seat full of diamonds illumining the dwelling places in all cities, accompanied by untold numbers of night goddesses, with a body appearing to the beings in all realms, with a body equal in form to all beings, with a body appearing to all beings, with a body unstained by all worlds, with a body equal to all beings in number of manifestations, with a body transcending all worlds, with a body adapted to developing and guiding all beings, with a body proclaiming the truth in all realms, with a body reaching everywhere, with a body ultimately freed from obstructions, with a body of the essence of those who arrive at thusness, with a body guiding all beings to ultimate perfection. Sadhana, enraptured upon seeing the night goddess, paid his respects to her and said, "O goddess, I have set out for supreme perfect enlightenment. Please tell me how an enlightening being is to be a benefactor to others while carrying out enlightening practice, and how an enlightening being is to take care of sentient beings with the highest protection and care, and how an enlightening being, engaged in the work of enlightening beings by the assent of the enlightened, is to approach the seat of a spiritual sovereign?" The night goddess replied, "It is very good that you ask about the way of practice of distributing teachings to sentient beings according to their mentalities, to attain the goal of guiding all sentient beings to perfection, to attain the goal of the effort to preserve the family of all Buddhas, to apply all-pervasive knowledge, to confront entry into the ocean of means leading to all realms of reality, to penetrate all nobles by knowledge boundless as space, to receive and hold the teachings of all Buddhas. I have attained an enlightening liberation, entry into the profound miracle of pleasing sound. Having attained this liberation, engaged in preaching the great teaching, free from attachment, dedicated to dissemination of the treasury of teachings of all Buddhas imbued with the power of great compassion and goodwill, set on working for the welfare of all sentient beings to inspire them to seek enlightenment, set out to become a leader of all sentient beings to ceaselessly accumulate stores of virtues and determination for enlightenment, engaged in producing clouds of teaching and suns of teaching in all worlds to guide all sentient beings on the path of omniscience, ceaselessly reaching out impartially to all sentient beings to illumine all worlds so as to produce infinite roots of goodness, applying a purified mind to practical knowledge of sustaining the performance of good works of all sentient beings, set out to lead all sentient beings to accord with all paths of good action, engaged in the work of directing all sentient beings in good ways, engaged in showing all sentient beings the way to peace and security, set out to lead all sentient beings to emancipation, engaged in directing all sentient beings to all good practices, set out to serve all spiritual friends uninterruptedly, engaged in directing all sentient beings to the teaching of the enlightened, engaged in undertaking all pure and good practices such as giving, firmly resolved to realize omniscience, with a broad mental sphere firmly focused on the powers of Buddhas. I stay by the spiritual benefactor, determined to shatter the mountains of afflictions and obstructions to enlightenment caused by actions, undertaking the preparations for omniscience, engaged in developing all good qualities, engaged in application of thought to the infinite variety of objects confronting omniscience. Furthermore, as I purify this medium of light of the teaching, communicating to all sentient beings, accumulating roots of goodness, I observe, approach, and proceed through the reality realm in terms of 10 aspects. What are the 10? I realize that the reality realm is immeasurable, by gaining vast vision of knowledge. I realize that the reality realm is infinitely various, so as to perceive the miracles of all Buddhas. I realize that the reality realm is endless, so as to fulfill travel to all Buddha lands and service of Buddhas. I realize that the reality realm is boundless, so as to show the practice of enlightening beings in all oceans of worlds. I realize that the reality realm is uninterrupted, so as to enter the sphere of unfragmented knowledge of those who arrive at thusness. I realize that the reality realm is one, so as to enter the sphere of the voice of those who realize thusness, which communicates to all sentient beings according to their mentalities. I realize that the reality realm is inherently pure, so as to realize the ultimate end of the past vow to guide all sentient beings to perfection. I realize that the reality realm is equal in all worlds, so as to enter the range of the practice of universal good. I realize that all realms of reality are adorned with one adornment, so as to comprehend the adornment of the miracle of the universally good enlightening being. I realize that the reality realm is imperishable, because of the imperishable nature of the purity of all good pervading the reality realm. Thus do I observe, approach, and proceed through the whole reality realm in terms of 10 aspects, to accumulate all roots of goodness, to realize the greatness of Buddhas, to arrive at the inconceivable sphere of Buddhas. Furthermore, I expound the teaching to sentient beings by means of the operation of 10,000 spheres of mental command, with the attention on the greatness of Buddha in this way. I expound the teaching to sentient beings by means of the operation of 10,000 spheres of mental command, beginning with the sphere of mental command called absorption in the ocean of all truths, the sphere of mental command of light of remembrance of all Buddhas, the sphere of mental command containing light illumining the ocean of deeds of all sentient beings, the sphere of pure mental command of absorption in the ocean of all means of liberation, the sphere of mental command uttering the names of all Buddhas, the sphere of mental command of absorption and manifestation of the ocean of past vows of all Buddhas, the sphere of mental command of swift turning of the attention to all truths, and the sphere of mental command called light of absorption in omniscience. Moreover, I teach sentient beings with wisdom consisting of learning, wisdom consisting of thinking, and wisdom consisting of practice. I teach sentient beings about the process of one existence, and I teach sentient beings about the processes of all existences. I teach about the ocean of names of one Buddha, I teach about the oceans of names of all Buddhas. I teach about one ocean of worlds, I teach about all oceans of worlds. I teach about the ocean of predictions of enlightenment of one Buddha, I teach about the oceans of predictions of enlightenment of all Buddhas. I teach about the ocean of audiences of one Buddha, I teach about the oceans of audiences of all Buddhas. I teach about the cycle of teachings of one Buddha. I teach about the oceans of cycles of teachings of all Buddhas. I teach about one scripture. I teach about the scriptures containing the cycles of teachings of all Buddhas. I teach about one gathering of an audience of a Buddha. I teach about the oceans of audiences of all Buddhas. I teach about one thought of omniscience. I teach about the oceans of all elements of determination for enlightenment. I teach about one vehicle of emancipation. I teach about the oceans of all vehicles of emancipation. I teach sentient beings in untold ways such as these. Entry into the oceans of those who arrive at thusness, identical to the structures of the reality realm, taking care of sentient beings in the highest spiritual way of expounding the teaching to them, living by the practice of universally good enlightening beings for endless eons. I cultivate this enlightening liberation of entry into the profound miracle of pleasing sound, by expanding it in every moment of consciousness, by the means of actualizing the sphere of liberation. And I pervade all realms of reality in every moment of thought with each means of actualizing the sphere of liberation. Sadhana said, "This enlightening liberation is marvelous. How long ago did you attain it?" The goddess said, "Many eons ago there was world called multitude of cities of spiritual lights, set on a network of lofty fragrant jewel mountains, as many as atoms in 4 continents, arrayed with lotus flowers intoning the past vows of all Buddhas, composed of multitudes of jewels produced by the deeds of all sentient beings, shaped like a huge lotus, pure with some defilement, encircled by as many masses of flowers as atoms in a mountain, adorned by lofty polar mountains of fragrant jewels, as many as atoms in a polar mountain, and with as many sets of 4 continents as atoms in a polar mountain. On each continent were untold trillions of cities. In that world there was an age called pure light, in which there arose as many Buddhas as atoms in a polar mountain. In the middle of the world was a set of 4 continents called Resplendent Banner, in the middle of which was a metropolis called Omnipresent Jewel Flower Light, not too far from which was an enlightenment site called Image of the Abode of a Spiritual Sovereign. At that site a Buddha named Illuminating King voicing the ocean of all truths arose, the first of the Buddhas of that age. At that time there was a monarch named Radiantly Pure Countenance, who received from that Buddha a scripture called Ocean of All Truths and followed it. After that Buddha passed away, the king left home and preserved the Buddha's teachings. At the time of the ending of the teaching, when it was divided into 1,000 sects, with 1,000 different explanations of the doctrine, and uninterrupted degeneracy of the age was imminent, in order to shake up the people shrouded by the barriers of afflictions and contentious quarrelsome mendicants, who were not seeking the virtues taught by the Buddha, but were wholly devoted to enjoyment of sense objects, addicted to talk of kings and thieves, addicted to talk of women, lands, and seas, addicted to materialistic thought and conversation. The renunciant king, a true follower of the religion, warned them, alas! The torch of the great teaching, which was developed over many eons, is going to die out. Then he rose into the sky to the height of 7 palm trees, emanated clouds of flames of infinite colors, produced great networks of multicolored lights from his body, extinguished the burning of afflictions in the world with multicolored light, and directed infinitely many sentient beings toward enlightenment. the Buddha's teaching was thereby rekindled and remained in the world for another 60,000 years. At that time there was also an unnamed light of projections of the wheel of the teaching. She was the daughter of that king radiantly pure countenance, and she had a retinue of 100,000 nuns. Hearing that rousing speech and seeing that great miraculous performance, she and her retinue had been inspired to seek enlightenment. Furthermore, those 100,000 nuns became irreversible in progress towards supreme perfect enlightenment. They attained a concentration called coming into existence in the presence of those who have arrived at thusness, and they attained a mental command called adamantine light of the teachings of all Buddhas, and a perfection of wisdom called entry into the principles of the ocean of all truths. The non-light of projections of the wheel of the teaching attained a concentration called lamp illumining the source of the teachings of all Buddhas, as well as this subtle, gentle enlightening liberation entry into the profound miracle of pleasing sound, after which all the miracles of the Buddha illuminating king voicing the ocean of all truths became visible to her. What do you think was the king of that time, who went forth into the teaching of the Buddha illuminating king voicing the ocean of all truths? Followed the Buddha's teaching, sustained the teaching after the Buddha's demise when it was dying out, and kindled the torch of the teaching. Anyone else? You should not see it this way. It was none other than Samantabhadra, the universally good enlightening being, who was that king radiantly pure countenance. And do you think the king's daughter, who became a nun, accompanied by 100,000 nuns, was anyone else? Do not see it that way. It was I myself who was that nun at that time. I preserved the teaching of that Buddha, and I made those 100,000 nuns irreversible in their progress toward supreme perfect enlightenment. I established them in the concentration coming into existence in the presence of those who have arrived at thusness. I established them in the mental command adamantine light of the teachings of all Buddhas, and the perfection of wisdom entry into the principles of the ocean of all truths. After that I learned from a Buddha named Light of the peak of knowledge of the mountain of the undefiled teaching, then crest of light, then multitudes of lights of the sun of the teaching, then sound of explanation of the ocean of the teaching, then light of the sphere of knowledge of the sun of the teaching, then cloud of banners marked by the flowers of the teaching, then supreme brilliance of the mass of lights of the teaching, then moon of light of the depth of the principles of the teaching, then mine of all images arising from knowledge of the teaching, then crowned with the treasury of knowledge, then king imbued with the glory of the highest mountain, then paragon of universal knowledge, then paragon of energy in all good practices, then multitude of lights of spiritual jewel flowers, then supreme depth of the light of peace, then moon radiating images of eyes of light, then ocean of brilliance of the flames of knowledge, then sphere of skill of universal knowledge, then light of knowledge of the nadir and zenith, then lamp blooming with flames, then supreme lion of knowledge, then supreme light of the universal sun, then lofty mountain adorned with precious characteristics, then complete reflection of the course of the sun, then radiant moon of awareness of the nexus of realities, then multitude of beauties of the blossoming of the lotus of the teaching, then universal light of the solar orb of the marks of distinction, then glorious voice of the all-illumining teaching, then adamantine lion of practical wisdom, then heroic paragon of universal knowledge, then embodiment of the flowering of the lotus of the teaching, then ocean of splendor of flowers of virtue, then mass of light from the pinnacle of spiritual treasures, then multitude of lights from the summit of knowledge, then light of jewels bearing all facets of the teaching, then glorious moon of awareness at the pinnacle of enlightenment, then moon glowing with the fire of the torch of the teaching, then all-reflecting crown, then lamp emblematic of the body of the teaching, then multitude of representations of the adamantine ocean, then clouds of glory of lofty repute, then radiant moon of sandalwood, then fiery light of flowers of universal beauty, then light shining on all beings, then beautiful calyx of the lotus of virtue, then king shining with fragrant flames, then lotus of logic, then shining with magnificent marks of greatness, then universally renowned, then polar mountain of light of impartial knowledge, then glory of light of the citadel of religion, then majestic as a forested mountain, then shining clarity of universal light, then sound of the ocean of the teaching, then energy arisen from the undertaking of all spiritual states, then foremost light of universal knowledge, then resplendent with superior qualities, then represented by the lance of spiritual power, then brilliant sound of the wheel of the teaching, then light of knowledge and wisdom crowned with radiant virtue, then glorious moonrise of the wheel of the teaching, then enlightened paragon illumining the lotus of the teaching, then jewel lotus full of light, then lamp of myriad peaks of jewel radiance, then flower of pure knowledge of universal vision, then vast treasury of lights, then king crowned with a halo of light beams, then crested with myriad virtues, then mass of manifestations of the pinnacle of religion, then energy of enormous virtue, then lamp of myriad suns of truth, then king acclaimed as a source of teaching, then multitude of sets of teachings, then light representative of the awareness of enlightened knowledge, then radiant moon aware of the sphere of realities, then magnificent as a mountain of gold and jewels, then top knot of myriad spheres of light of all truths, then flaming light of the wheel of teaching, then lofty majesty, then myriad lights of the torch of all-sided energy, then light of vast crowning wisdom sealed by concentration, then beautiful jewel light, then voice of arrays of jewels from the light of the teaching, then powerful light in the sky of reality, then moon adorned with marks of greatness, then flashing cloud on a mountain of light, then light in the unobstructed sky of reality, then body blossoming with the beauty of the marks of greatness, then supreme splendor and voice of the world ruler, then light and sound of concentration on all truths, then mine of initiatory sounds, then sound of the ocean of blazing flames of the teaching, then light of reflections of the appearances of past, present, and future, then shining light of the highest splendor of the sphere of the teaching, then powerful light in the realm of reality, then lion manifesting the ocean of all concentrations, then light of total knowledge, then lamp of the city of reality with the light of universal wisdom. In that age pure light, as many Buddhas as atoms in the polar mountain appeared, beginning with these. The last of them was a Buddha named Supreme Lamp of Knowledge lighting the city of the reality realm. I served all those Buddhas from the first to the last, and I listened to their teachings, and left society to delve into all their teachings. I kept all their instructions in mind, and from all of them I attained this enlightening liberation of entry into the profound miracle of pleasing sound, by various methods of attainment, and I matured infinitely many sentient beings in the presence of all those Buddhas. Since then I served all the Buddhas that have emerged in as many eons as atoms in a Buddha land by putting their teachings into practice. Thenceforth I have been awake in the midst of beings asleep in the slumber of nishant during the night of mundane routines. I have guarded the city of their minds, removed them from the city of the triple world, and settled them in the city of the Way of Omniscience. Continue to video 26.